Hello and welcome everyone to this session as part of the Africa PropTech Forum. I am Sean Godoy and I'm very happy to be as a moderator of this very interesting panel discussion with some esteemed panelists, which I'm sure are going to offer us some fantastic insights. I'm co-founder of the PropTech Africa Association and also director of Diversity Property Solutions, by way of a little background. I'm just going to start with obviously what we'll be covering today. So the title of our session is From Disruption to Value in a Post-COVID-19 World. So this looks at overcoming operational, regulatory and social barriers to PropTech adoption in Africa and looking at practical implications for technology in valuations, digital land administration, construction and facilities management as part of the overall value chain. So without further ado, I'm going to jump in and ask our esteemed panelists to introduce themselves. We have Genevieve Naidu from Nedbank. So Genevieve, if you could please start us off with a little brief introduction. Thank you.
Thanks. I'm from Nedbank Property Finance. Nedbank Property Finance has the largest market share in South Africa and is a fairly newly established Property Finance Africa business. Nedbank's proud to be associated with the API and a proud sponsor of this event. I myself am actually a quantity surveyor by training. I've worked in practice, but have been in banking for the last 15 years. And so when I refer to banking, specifically in the commercial property realm, it's really been in very traditional roles, in and with traditional systems and processes that are already in place. And you would see that the South African property market is really a mature market in many ways. And whilst different technologies have always been there, the PropTech evolution has really surfaced in the recent past. And really with the COVID pandemic, it has catapulted us into a learning and tech journey like no other. So we've really had to think differently about how we do things. Technology is integrated in our everyday lives, and the digital innovation continues to challenge the traditional ways in which we have done things in the past. And so we're now looking at what PropTech offers us as a public finance business in terms of how we bring value enhancements, the cost benefit for adoption, the value proposition for our clients who are at the center of our business, and obviously being able to stay ahead of our competitors through the process.
Sean, your mic is off.
My mistake. Sorry all. This always seems to happen to everyone, no matter how many times we do these things. But apologies. Sithebe, if you could please introduce yourself next.
Okay, thank you so much. My name is, like you said, Sithebe Manake from, I'm the founding director of Vantage Properties, a company that has transitioned from being a real estate research and consulting firm and quickly into PropTech. The transition was quite obvious from 2015 when we realized the trends towards the influence of technology on investment and development in the future. So we took our time from 2015 to transition into technology, basing on trying to move from the ordinary real estate research into big data. And with that, we have built a couple of platforms that assist us with the big data analytics. And most recently, we've now launched an automated valuation platform, which is GoSmartValue.com in Botswana. And so far, people are able to do automatic valuations of residential property using it. And so far, it's actually been quite interesting that the platform is not just to assess your property valuation individually, but it also connects customers and valuers in that one can get a detailed valuation, instruct a detailed valuation. From a valuer's perspective, the key things that we normally want as valuers is getting your comparables, getting your land rates, getting all of that kind of stuff. So these are now made available through GoSmart Value. That therefore makes the turnaround time for a valuation process much faster. For the financial institutions also, the platform is now being used to assess the loan book values, especially now after COVID and all of that. So it's been quite an interesting time for us since we launched. So the idea was to launch GoSmart Value in April fully, and then we went full on lockdown the 28th of March. Then we had to really have a soft release, and it was very interesting doing all the pitching to clients during lockdown, and it caught on, and it's being used. So yeah, that's our contribution to PropTech at the moment, and we look forward to being able to expand GoSmart Value to other real estate sectors, your commercial, your industrial, and possibly outside of Botswana too. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Automated valuation is quite an interesting area of PropTech, so I'm sure we'll touch on that in our discussion. Ronald, next, if you would please introduce yourself.
Yes, I'm Ronald Kawesi, and I'm one of the founders of PropTech Uganda. My profession is I'm a valuer by profession, real estate valuer by profession. And yes, at PropTech Uganda, it's a built environment platform where we attract innovators and corporate companies to come together and develop solutions for the built environment sector in general. And real estate is one of the icon segments of built environment, among other segments. Also at Built Environment, we most especially work with innovators, whereby we develop the project, or we initiate the project, and we see that the corporate companies or other market leaders take on these the development and initiatives that have been developed by innovators in the area of real estate.
Fantastic. Thank you. I'm sure that's given you some interesting insights into the sector, and also in terms of the real estate players themselves and their opinions and approaches, which is something also we're going to touch on. So yeah, thank you very much. It's fantastic to have you all here and such a sort of diverse range of experience and skills that'll, I'm sure, offer some great perspectives. So let's jump straight in. So the first question, I'd be grateful to get input from each of you. Any time you have something you want to sort of add or a point to raise, you can let me know, and we're happy to let you do. The first question I have, perhaps Genevieve, you could start us off. Which parts of the real estate value chain for the most potential in terms of PropTech, and also current success that is evident? So obviously valuation is one thing Sithebe touched on, but the whole value chain is quite exciting, and obviously each step is very unique. So yeah, Genevieve, your thoughts on that, please.
Sure. So it's interesting being on a financier side, because you get to see a very different side of what PropTech can do for us as a bank in terms of our risk processes, but what also it can do for our clients, and whether we are able to package potential PropTech initiatives to assist them and create value for them. And lockdown for us was sort of a massive shift in terms of how we did things traditionally. And I keep referring to this traditional orthodox way, because really we've had to start thinking differently as a result of the pandemic. And just to step back and talk about some of the key pieces on it, because it is quite important to understand the potential we saw in having had to make shift some of the things we did over this time. One of the key learnings that we identified was site monitoring during a construction phase of a project. So to be able to get to a property once lockdown, once sites were open again, and to be able to inspect that. And we send out our teams to have a look at these properties and assess risk and be able to pay out various stakeholders. And now what we saw was that our teams were quite nervous in terms of going to these properties, because it was fairly new in terms of what was going on with the COVID pandemic, social distancing, protocol on site, etc. And so we sort of came up with an idea quite quickly to say, are we able to do virtual site inspections to be able to pay out clients? Because at the end of the day, we were still wanting to be able to service our clients in the same way. And what turned out to be such a simple makeshift idea actually favored us tremendously, because we initiated this process, and it was very simple. A WhatsApp video call, you walk, whoever's on site walks through the site, you have the bank's project manager, you have whoever else on the call, so you can add participants. And then suddenly we realized there's an opportunity as a financier to be able to do this and provide this for our clients. So we started engaging with a couple of tech companies to see what is it that they offer. And the first one that we looked at was potentially using drone technology. But that has some limitations in that you have to get someone to fly the drone. So you have to make sure that everything's arranged for a particular time, that everyone is available, etc. And then part of our disruption team, and Jess Davies is going to speak at the conference as well, was to say they've actually met an organization that's based in the US that use a GoPro technology on a hard hat to walk through a site. And it really is the person that is on site, that is the resident foreman or site manager or engineer, whoever it is that's there, that's actually walking his 10,000 steps, for lack of a better word, on a site, that's actually capturing data with the GoPro. The easiest thing was that all we had to do is just to remember that he needed to switch his GoPro on. And so walking through a building site, we were able to get to see live data. And whereas if you think of a bank where a risk professional or a project manager inspects a property once a month, we're now able to see live data for the last 30 days, which we were never able to do. And so we actually piloting something like that in our organization to be able to say, what does this mean for our clients? How quickly can we pay out a client? How quickly can we get to variations or cost overruns or issues on a site by actually using the data that we are able to see? And we're quite fortunate at the PropTech conference, because I believe OpenSpace is also presenting, so it'll be fantastic to see their technology in it. The second piece for me was quite a special piece in that, and it talks to Sitebe's valuation part, which was how do we use the data that we have? And so joining the organization and realizing we have 300,000 data points of all our properties, etc., over the last few years, and trying to understand what trends are and what information we have, and so which we hadn't mined adequately at all. And so part of this journey was to say, what can we do with this data? Have we ever heat mapped our properties? Are we able to identify concentration risks per subsector, per node, per tenant? In fact, what have cap rates been doing over the last 5 years, or escalations, etc.? And so we've managed to develop. We've actually developed an app for our valuers, our internal valuations team, that are able to capture some of these data points to enhance the data that we already have. And we do believe that, we're actually, it's a fantastic tool. It can be captured on a mobile device for our valuers, and it's instant. And then we decide, how do you want to change the data? How do you want to look at it? How do you want to stress test it? Because coming out of these uncertain times, as we all know, we don't know where values will land. With all that in your landscape, the best that you can do is do your scenario testing and your scenario analysis the best that you can. So with this data, we're able to do that quite easily. So we've been quite fortunate that it's actually forced us to think differently about our own data as well.
Fantastic. Yeah, those are quite interesting, quite differing areas of the value chain, because there's a lot of opportunity in construction as well, like you said, and through COVID there was a lot about actual site inspection. So it's really interesting to hear how you guys sort of use technology to overcome those challenges. And then on the valuation data side, that's very exciting, because so many organizations have so much data, and there's new ways to use it and collect it. So those are really, really interesting practical examples. So thank you for that. That's fantastic. Moving on, Sitebe, what are your comments on the value chain and the potential there? Obviously, you've mentioned the valuation, which in itself is very exciting as well.
Yeah, I think the most interesting thing for us is like what Genevieve was mentioning, getting to have remote access and remote inspections, which is one of the key things that some of our valuers were interested in. That yes, I can get my instruction remotely, and I can process my valuation remotely without having to go to the office. But I still need to go to somebody's house who may or may not have COVID. How do I protect myself, or how do I interact with my customers in that way? So we also went on to into WhatsApp calls. If the client has got WhatsApp, then they'll take you through their house with that. And we haven't found a way to integrate that yet, but at least it's giving the valuers who are using the platform that option of even now being able to do inspections anywhere in the country, following each other without having to incur your travel costs. And it's such a great opportunity for people to be able to explore at a time where it's supposed to be financially difficult, but transactions are happening and work is still being done. And if you're able to reduce your costs during this process, then aren't we going to come out a little bit better at the end of all of this? I don't know. I think, yeah, you did mention construction. This side, not so much. We haven't seen much of that transition yet. We've seen more, I think, on the agency side, there has been more movement in having virtual tours or having some kind of either using the WhatsApp or doing more video virtual tours for people to be able to access, and just general interest in, okay, fine, if this is possible, then I can be able to transact without having seen my valuer, seen my banker, or seen my agent, or even seen the property at all. So it's quite interesting that we are moving into this stage where it's not fundamentals. Okay, it's either this thing works or it doesn't work. It has nothing to do with the personality behind the transaction.
Yeah, very interesting. Thanks again for those points. I mean, I think on the agency transaction side, there was a lot happening in terms of online sort of listing platforms, and then those kind of evolving into online transaction platforms. You know, and there's a lot to be said around blockchain, etc. Even though it's difficult to implement, but it is obviously there's opportunity, but it's quite interesting how you say that people find a way to do things. You know, business is still happening. It always shows you, where there's a will, there's a way. And like you've said, we probably, well, most definitely, you can see it already. Organizations coming out stronger, I think, as well. So I agree. It's been a challenging year in a lot of ways, and it still is. But I think it's going to be that will come out better for it. So thank you, Sithebe. That's fantastic. Ronald, we'll move on to you now. Your insights on the value chain and the potential you see.
Thank you. My opinion is that if you look at the entire value chain, for example, from pre-construction, we still have fragmented systems whereby the engineer is using one system, the quant surveyor uses another system, then you get to the project manager uses just another system. Currently, these fragmented systems are still a challenge right now until the client says there's he decides to use a one holistic system that cuts across all the professions. So we still have this challenge whereby all the stakeholders, for example, pre-construction, use the fragmented systems, and the client does not have a holistic, let me say, one point where he gets all the information regarding his project. Then if you move from the pre-construction side, but still there's some advantages, because initially we see quantity surveyors were so much using Excel. Now they're adapting applications such as DimensionX. Also, building information modeling is coming into play, but still it's too fragmented. So there's still market for this, and one holistic point for project management or for pre-construction will be a good initiative. If we move away from that and go to construction procurement and logistics, it's picking up. Now we see, especially in this pandemic, where literally one had to go to a hardware and buy cement, buy a couple of equipment. Now there are platforms that have come up for you to buy this, and they even deliver them to your site. So this is going to pick up, and I don't think the game is going to be the same, whereby you still have to go or you still have to buy this. So these platforms, I foresee them being adapted a lot. Then past that, if we go to the construction part of it, we are still lagging behind in terms of materials. Brick and mortar is still the usual construction type used currently, and though we foresee a lot of modular construction coming to play, but the adaptation curve is still low for modular construction. And this comes back also to the regulation. For example, in Uganda, Kampala Capital City Authority does not allow the plans for modular construction. You cannot bring your container or your prefabricated construction for approvals in the city. So this will have to change, and the discussion around this will have to change. And to finish up, post-construction, I foresee building technologies have come into play, whereby accessibility, accessing the security of my home, wherever I am, is there are now a lot of applications coming up for this. Also, if it comes to efficiency, energy efficiency, or if it comes to sunlight efficiency of my home, these are coming up, but they don't yet at the pace at which we expect them to be. This rate.
Fantastic, thank you, Ron. It's interesting how the construction has come up a few times, and this, you know, in some circles, prop tech and construction technology or Contech, you know, they are viewed separately, but it's actually really important. I think, like the conversation we're having today, is to bring construction in, because the two are obviously related. You know, there will be the operation of the building, and there's the funding before that, but the whole value chain, you know, it spreads from the sort of real estate management investment to the design construction. So it's really interesting that that's actually come through. So it's definitely something to highlight. And it's something, I think construction technology is something to speak about more, you know, from, you mentioned materials, and Genevieve, like those site inspections, and also collecting data and having, you know, there's certain sensor technology on sites that you can improve efficiencies and management. And like you said, there's a lot of team members from the banks, you know, project manager, the valuer, the site manager. There's a whole team there, obviously, that would like to check progress, you know, the QS, the architect. So it's quite interesting to see how these things are happening. And then down to the physical things, like you said, Ronald, especially in Africa, I think there's a lot to be said that we could build, you know, quicker, more cost effectively, especially in things like affordable housing. So yeah, lots to be said for modular construction and the like. So yeah, thank you very much. I see Satebe has dropped off. I think she had to leave us, but obviously thank you to her for her contributions. Let's move on. So bringing the conversation back to the continent dynamics on the continent, because as I said earlier in the description of the session, there are certain barriers, you know, operational, regulatory. This tends to be quite a large consideration in certain things, especially if it's investment or transaction based. And then social barriers, there's also mindsets, etc. So in terms of the continent, what I wanted to ask is, what are the dynamics within real estate sectors within the continents and the regions and countries they're in that provide opportunity for PropTech? And then what are the barriers as part of that? So obviously the makeup of markets, you know, the dynamics lead to opportunities and also barriers. So I just wanted to ask, also this could be on a regional scale or country specific or just general, that's up to you. But yeah, Genevieve, if you could start us off on that one, please.
Thanks, Sean. So it's quite an interesting question, because it's, you know, the markets are very different across Africa, and you know, if I think of South Africa in itself, like, you know, and we've been in a fairly good cycle for the last 20 years, and now that things really have changed in terms of where values would land and what really, you know, there's questions around, you know, what the structural vacancies would look like in properties, and what potentially is there an opportunity for repurposing buildings, etc. And then you say, okay, well, it's almost like an element of prop tech, and whether, you know, and anywhere through the process. But what's the barrier, the biggest barrier in SA? I think it's a mindset shift. So we have traditionally done things in a particular way. There's the key players or the leaders in our property industry, and that are, you know, parts of large organizations that, you know, hold multiple properties, etc. You know, there's a way in which things have worked for years and years and years. And so, you know, so part of that is to say, well, you know, should we be adopting something new, or are we ready for change or digitization, or are we assessing our data well enough? And, you know, often when people talk about innovation in these spaces, they say, you know, CEOs, etc., will talk about, yes, there is someone looking at it, or there's an element of it. But when it comes down to actually, you know, what does it mean tangibly for an organization? I think there's a perception or a reluctance to actually embrace certain change. Where we're seeing that, I mean, if you just look at the South African market and the startups that we've got from a property point of view, there's lots of young, innovative people that are coming to present different apps and different ideas, etc. And so you kind of think to yourself, well, shouldn't our, you know, these larger organizations be open to understanding what these things can do for them? And I'll give you a really nice example. When we, in North America, over the last couple of months, when they were in lockdown as well, the regional shopping centers really struggled in terms of bringing customers in for obvious reasons. I mean, we're seeing the same sort of trend in SA. And what they did was they encouraged people to come to their malls to do their walking, or, you know, their 10,000 steps, for lack of a better word. And what that did was they brought people in. Granted, they were much earlier or later in the day, or whenever people felt comfortable to come in and walk around the mall, getting their 10,000 steps in. But at the same time, you'd have to, you know, there's the parking element that you're now receiving income from. The coffee shops can get you'd buy a coffee. If you're meeting a friend or a family member to walk around with, you'd usually buy a coffee. And then you can get to a store to be able to grab a few things that you wouldn't ordinarily buy at a regional shopping center, right? You would go to a local convenience center, or you would basically buy it online if you had to. So that mindset change was a big change for the, you know, that actually attracted people in North America to these shopping centers. And granted, they would not be at the numbers that they were, but they weren't at the other end where it was extremely, you know, empty. And so we've got to start thinking about these things differently. And part of that is to challenge our owners of property assets in the countries to say, how are you thinking differently about what this new way of the world is going to be, with social distancing, with changes of behavior of customers, with why they're going to a mall? What is it from what are the requirements now versus previously that people would go and spend time in a mall from an entertainment perspective or shopping perspective? So now we've really got to challenge the mindset in that. And so for me, the big thing is traditionalism versus digitization. And I say digitization because I really mean it's all encompassing. So digitization that brings in, artificial intelligence, machine learning, deep learning from that. And, you know, just to try and understand what we need to do to be able to make ourselves still relevant going forward post the pandemic, and being able to keep our retail assets as well as other assets more sustainable. I mean, if you think of offices, the challenge with there is that there is going to be a portion of people that will be working from home, or of your workforce that will be working from home. Your buildings have to be adjusted to ensure there's no contact. What does it mean from a commuter perspective? What does it mean for shops and restaurants around traditional office nodes, etc.? So we've got to start thinking differently about our assets that we have and how we're thinking about them and adopting technology in these spaces. The other piece for me, and I think this is not just in SA, but across some of the jurisdictions that we've seen some great initiatives from a PropTech perspective, is scale. So, where we're seeing these fantastic ideas come up, but we can't get to scale. And so some of the challenges around it would be, why isn't there scale? What are we not doing right in terms of adopting these things? What is a marketing strategy? Why aren't we getting it to where it needs to be? Because if it's really something that moves the market, people should be aware of it. I mean, for me, when we think of PropTech, there's two elements for it. There's two parts of it, and one is to deal with inefficiencies in terms of how we make things better in our existing worlds. But then there's also the innovation part, which talks to how do we disrupt, or what's disrupting or complementing the market. And so we've got to be able to distinguish the two and then say, okay, the barriers aligned to that are really very different in terms of per region, as well as per real estate market within each country.
Great. Thank you very much. Sorry, I just had a connection issue there. But thank you very much for those points. It's obviously quite a dynamic, fluid market at the moment, and some changes have been coming for a while, and some are new. But I like the point and the example you used from the US and attracting people to shopping centers, because I read something recently. PropTech, it'll always be like a physical thing in some ways and related to technology and digital interventions in property, but it's more and more becoming a mindset, and a mindset around innovation, like you said. And innovation can be a lot of things, it doesn't need to be even tech driven. So really interesting to hear your thoughts. And I think it's sort of an education, and there's a lot of learning and I think consideration for both sides of the part of the table, in terms of established corporates and established professionals, and then those with new ideas. You've got to have, I think, an understanding. But yeah, thank you very much for those great points. Ronald, your insights on dynamics and opportunities and barriers?
Yes, thank you. So, I think Genevieve makes a very, very important point of whereby she says that scaling is really important. But just to build on that is that, for example, what I know in African market is we are building these innovations for, let's say, either business to business or for the general public as consumers or as customers. And the first point is identification of the market, or identification of the challenge. I'll take it as the first point. And what happens is that we see that innovations that have come up in line with they've come up as a pilot with let's say with a corporate or with a company or with a customer, are easily adopted, and they have a use case that they can show up out there. So the opportunity I see in this is that many innovators, for example, in Uganda now, are identifying what is the challenge and who is facing this challenge in particular, so that that is our starting point. And this is it's helping many innovators and innovations to just not drop out of the blue and they come into the space, and then they start looking for what challenge can we address. So the partnerships are very, very important, for example, with the corporate world, because if you look at the dynamics of it, is that these know the market. They have, first of all, the funding. They know the market. But the other challenge they face is that they are risk averse. They don't want to go into investing a lot into innovation. They don't want to hire a digital officer to look for innovation or scouting. So this is where innovators have the opportunity to come up and partner with these corporate companies and other initiatives. And another opportunity I see is from the side of of funding from both the public and private sector, and the government is trying to put up in a couple of initiatives. I think this cuts across the entire continent. I see all regions. The public sector is trying to come up with in the Ministry of ICT platforms, whereby we see they're supporting startups to come up. But if you look at the real estate sector, it's not that everyone is jumping so much into it. Most of the people are circling around. When we talk of Africa, Innovations Africa, many people circle around health and education as the complementary challenges. For real estate, we see that you have to either have a background knowledge about it, or you have to have the interest of answering a certain challenge. So the opportunity I see is that also people who have the interest to answer these challenges are the ones getting to the market. And it's not just if you meet someone and they tell you something about real estate from the finance aspect of it or blockchain. It's people who have the interest. So this is an opportunity I see innovations coming into. The challenge I see in this field is, of course, it gets back to what is the regulation also, because we see our markets are, for example, in East Africa, we still have things that are lagging us behind, such as, for example, the registration of land. Not all land is registered. Apparently, around 75% of it is registered. And for an innovation that relies informally on let me say informal systems, you are likely to face a couple of challenges, and also your market is likely you're likely not to meet your expectations from this aspect, from this perspective. And other barrier I see coming into play is the aspect where we see, for example, innovators and startups, when they identify a market, I think Genevieve mentioned scaling. It's not good to stay on one challenge or to stay in one market. We're facing this in terms of duplication of innovations, and this is where we're helping startups and innovators. That what is your unique selling point? For example, we have 2 marketing applications. One is more of you search for the property, then you get the property, and the other one also came in the same aspect of searching for the property, then you get the property. But the third one came in the aspect of it's not about searching for the property; it's about data. Which properties are listed, who has been selling them, and how are they, when were they sold, sorry. And so their selling point is getting this data and making use of this data. So the challenge will be scaling and duplication of innovations. It's quite a challenge, but I think that can be addressed later on.
Fantastic. Thank you, Ronald. I think you highlighted some really key points there. One of them is to identify the challenge or the problem, and then think about the product and not the other way around. Because I think you need to obviously address something that's useful and that is a real challenge for organizations and bodies. So that you can't go wrong. And then obviously a local solution for local problems. So play to your markets as well, but take inspiration from overseas. And then supports. I think what you mentioned is a key thing. I think in tech in general in Africa, I think places like East and West Africa often do better to support tech ecosystems, from the public sector and funding, etc. So I think Southern Africa, we have some lessons to learn there, and there's also regulatory support. So we'll see where that goes. And the general tech conversation, like you said, a lot on education, health, which is fantastic. But there's a lot to come for real estate, because I think the markets themselves are maturing, which is really interesting. And a key thing is land registries. I'm a big supporter of digital land registries or land information systems, because they can really unlock remove many efficiencies in real estate markets and unlock growth. And also they offer really exciting foundations for prop techs to do things, particularly around data and transactions. So those are some fantastic points. I think we've come to the end of our time. It always seems to run out too quickly, but I think we need to wrap up there. So I'd like to thank you both very much, and Tebe, Genevieve, Ronald, for sharing your insights and taking the time. It really has been fantastic. So thank you for contributing to the Africa PropTech Forum. And yes, all the best and take care.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, guys. And goodbye. And to everyone, thank you so much for joining us, and enjoy the rest of the conference.